Aaron Thomas here in Black Tulip Studios. Welcome to the third Sorry, let me. I don't need to say that. I'm just going to say welcome to the Well-Mannered Monsters podcast. All right. Aaron Thomas here in Black Tulip Studios. Welcome to the Well-Mannered Monsters podcast. And joining with us is your co-host, Scalise.
Hello.
I am so excited about today. Starting the morning off with doing that short clip or the, I don't know if we're going to call it quick take, hot take, probably just quick take videos.
Yeah, quick take.
It was a lot of fun, man.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's great.
Liked it.
Yeah, keep it short, keep it witty, keep it moving, and then we could drill down into some of the bigger, more substantive points in these longer shows, you know. It's good.
Yeah, so from now on, we're going to take a portion or a specific topic in, or at least a little more kind of focused topic in the broader, from the broader, bigger podcast and make short videos, basically 8 to 10 minute clips of our response to, the material that we're covering in the bigger podcast.
Because you just have to do it. I mean, there is just so much lunacy, and sometimes you just need to laugh at it, and then let's come back to it and be serious, because it also portends, pretty bad things. So let's be serious about it too. But I mean, some of this stuff is just absurd clown nonsense, total nonsense.
Yeah. No, I mean, so today we're talking about Nina Jankowicz, our new Ministress of Truth, and also the new Ministry of Truth, or the Disinformation Governance Board, right? She's
the czar of the Disinformation Governance Board. Yes, and she's a Looney Tunes. I mean, that lady looks like she is out there. I'm talking out there. Scary.
Yeah, it's so building on the kind of quick take you did earlier, like what's your response to, I guess, start off with the Ministry of Truth, and then we'll get to Nina Jankowicz.
Yeah, so let's do a little bit of history here and try to kind of frame this so everyone understands what's happening. Here's the big narrative. Big narrative is this: back in Dr. Shiva in Connecticut, I believe he's in Connecticut. It's either Connecticut or New Hampshire, but he was trying to run for Congress there. I think the state Congress. And I can't remember, he got suppressed somehow in his electoral efforts. And part of that had to do with him getting censored on Twitter, I believe. And so he filed a lawsuit. And in that lawsuit, it went to court, and he was allowed to do discovery. In the course, and we'll post a link to this, but in the course of discovery, it was revealed that there was a direct line from the U.S. government to Twitter that told Twitter who to censor. In this case, it happened to be Dr. Shiva. Now, that was earth-shattering, because you get in these debates with people, and obviously the First Amendment in the United States says that the government, public entities, cannot censor the free speech of citizens, but it doesn't say anything about private entities doing so, right? Private entities can have whatever policies they want. And, of course, Twitter shouldn't be doing it anyways, because they're supposed to be a conglomerator, not an editor or a publisher. But we know that they've been violating that for a while. So that's the big picture, okay? And so what that tells you is that fascism, that is almost like definitional fascism, where corporations do the will of the government, because in our case, the government either doesn't want to be known to be doing it, or they are not supposed to be doing it according to our laws, which is the case in the United States. So that's kind of the big picture. So fast forward now to today, or the past few days, Twitter is kind of the filter for all other news cycles. I don't know if people know that, but that's what it is. And so the left, the corrupt politicians, the deep state, they've just lost their primary weapon in the information war, and their primary weapon in censoring our First Amendment, that they could do so under. Now, it was coming out, but hidden, right, where they could basically break the most important law of the United States, which is the First Amendment. Okay, and so now, and basically they've said, to hell with it. We're just going to come right out and show that, create a Disinformation Governance Board so that we can censor free speech and violate the First Amendment. They were already doing it. All that's happening now is they've been exposed that they're doing it.
Yeah. So, to restate that, one of the things that's been happening, how long has it been actually? Probably 3-4 years now? Or do you think it's actually been longer that the government's had a relationship with Twitter that they've been using?
It's probably longer.
A direct line in order to censor.
It's probably in here, like we're guessing here, so go ahead and get that out there. But I know that it was the mass banning of Alex Jones across all the platforms at the same time that really told us, this was in 2016, that there was mass collusion going on here between either the big tech companies or the big tech companies and the government. So whatever you think about Alex Jones, it's just the fact that it was a mass banning, and that was very odd, right? That that supposedly these are all separate entities making their own decisions and policies, but then they all started censoring the same people, and that started in 2016. So I think we could point to at least 2016, because everything started hitting the fan, so to speak, with Trump coming into power.
So there's a direct line by the government. They're essentially using Twitter to do something that they're not allowed to do because of our First Amendment. And the fact that they lost this tool now, they're essentially just going for it over, like, direct in our face now, just forming a disinformation board that's designed to censor whoever they deem worthy to be censored or whose rights they believe they can. Apparently that right's just done. Like, our Constitution is shredded on that end of things right now, because if they can do that, it doesn't matter. They're not even trying to hide it.
Yeah,
it's just straight up, we can do this.
Yeah, they're not, and I'm not sure why they're not trying. I mean, they were already doing it, and I think so. Part of it's like maybe they know that we already knew that they were doing it, but maybe.
So now it's the time to see if the people are willing to actually accept it directly in their face. Like, no hiding it. Just, are the people willing to accept that the government can violate your First Amendment rights?
Yeah, and the left does this. They kind of test the water. The other thing that they could be going for is that, okay, so we know this isn't going to stand, right? Let's say it goes to Supreme, because it's probably not going to stand. But let's say they can do it through the midterm elections. That might be all they care about. By the way, First Amendment, folks, says, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press or of the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. So again, this is why Twitter could have done it. Now, they weren't supposed to be, because they're not supposed to be publishers or editors, but they say private companies can limit free speech if you work for that corporation within their realm of influence, right? They can do that. That's why
they can. But apparently there was something different about their structure. Like, their corporate structure was different than a publisher. So the way that was regulated, or is supposed to be regulated, is different.
Yes, correct.
So they apparently,
go ahead.
As an open platform and not a publisher, they're actually, even as a private company, not supposed to do that.
Correct. Right, yeah.
Interestingly enough, according to Section 2, I think we mentioned this in the last video, Title 230.
Yeah, Title 230, that's right. Trump's spoken a lot about it and just says it's basically they get liability protection over what's said on their platform because they're not the ones basically tailoring what's being said. But, of course, that's precisely what they're doing. So I'm not sure why they get...
Yeah, have been doing...
But, we, so freedom of, so by the way, friends, what Nina Jankowicz and what Mayorkas, the head of DHS, Department of Homeland Security, what he said in Congress is real. I mean, she's scary just because she looks like a crazy loon who's probably also a communist. But he's scary because he says that they want to identify people that may be, so you haven't yet, but you may be descending into violence. And so so this is almost a little bit more frightening than even that they want to censor what you say. It's almost like they want to conglomerate your data and basically say he has a profile. So you might not have actually said anything that's actually violent, advocating physical violence or whatever the standard would be, right? You might not have done. They might just say you have a profile that suggests you might. Like, that's starting to get into thought and pre-crime, right?
This is a group of people, who are suggesting that pre-crime is something they actually have the power and the ability to suss out. And by Mayorkas' video, he believes that she is absolutely unbiased. This is, I mean, that's dangerous. And the thing that I really, that's extremely nefarious about this is some of their forward-facing statements were trying to say that this organization or this board is only about trying to protect immigrants. Did you see that?
No, I didn't see
It's
it.
something, I think it's two-part. It's about, oh yeah, human trafficking. One of the main things that they were focused on was trying to protect people who were being human trafficked. And then there was one other point that I saw, but they essentially designed this forward-facing statement to make it look like, well, you know, like everything else that's been done, this is designed to be well-intended. And then you have, you know, some of these deep dives by Mayorkas describing what they're going to do. And it's like, no, there's no way that's what that's intended for.
Well,
It's
I mean,
so dangerous, man.
of course they lie about what the point of it is, but I mean, it's a direct assault on the First Amendment, clearly, and it can't stand. Tucker Carlson said it can't stand. DeSantis says it can't stand, and they're not even willing to discuss it. When they're making, and that's how it should be. Your public statement should just be, this has got to go. That's it.
I'm tired of these guys using minorities and children to just absolutely blind people. You basically come out and say that you're trying to protect the innocent, the impoverished, you know, the proverbial desire, right? What we're actually commanded. You know, Christians make up a lot of the demographic in this country, and if they're following the word, like that's one of the things we're commanded to do, is take care of the widow, take care of the impoverished, take care of the alien that's being taken advantage of in your country. That's all the things, like a big part of what we're commanded to do. And they're using this. They're just using this description that's what it's designed for in our face, so we can't go against it or else we look like monsters. And then they turn around and do this. What's actually happening under the hood is pre-crime, where you essentially set people up. You decide on whatever criteria it is, not what's lawful, the fact that somebody actually committed a crime, did violence against somebody else. You go ahead and weed it out according to whatever criteria this organization comes up with by people who believe themselves absolutely unbiased.
It's nonsense, and you're right. I mean, they do always masquerade under some good, and you know, bravo to them for being smart enough to do that. But shame on us that that we haven't figured out that's what they do, because they don't care about any of those people, and we know that, and it doesn't matter anyways, right? I mean, like if you're being strict to the Constitution, it would just say that's nice that you want to protect them, but you don't get to violate the laws of the land because you have good intentions about something. But that's precisely what they do, right? Or they claim they do. They don't actually have good intentions. They just want the power that the good intentions gives them, right?
It's one of those things where the old cliches come back, and it's like, there's some of them that you should just absolutely pay attention to. It's almost like certain traditions. Not all traditions are good, but some have been carved out of just, you know, I mean, some of them are birthed from groups of people over long periods of time, finding out what is true and right and what actually works. And the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Very cliche statement, one that people have heard for years. Totally true, though. Absolutely true. At least good intentions that are unmoored from reality and wisdom and discernment is definitely.
Well, yeah, because I mean, yeah, and of course, there's the bigger question there: good intentions according to whose moral framework. So I mean, that's probably the point we're coming to with the left in this country, is that their moral framework is essentially what would make up our framework of vice. And so even if and then they kind of appeal to something that we might share in common, like, oh, you want to protect the rights of somebody or what have you. But it's garbage. I mean, it's nonsense. We shouldn't give them the satisfaction of letting them dominate. Can I speak to the? Let me speak to the whole notion of bias for a second. So, My doctorate,
Yeah.
by and large, has to do with worldview, and a big component of that is epistemology, which is the study of knowledge, how we know what we know, what do we know, and is it justified that we know it. So that's epistemology. But here's the deal. Being human is to be what's called a conditioned or contingent creature, period. Conditioned means that there will always be things that frame or affect or influence the way you see the world, period. There is no such thing as a neutral human. That is leftist garbage that was born out of what's called the modernist movement, but it's leftist garbage that they fed us and that we are hurting ourselves with by agreeing to say that there's some measure of neutral ground. This is not a battlefield where you say, well, we're going to both fly white flags and then we're going to meet in the middle. So somebody might say, oh, there's neutral ground there. Sure. But that's not what we're talking about. An ideological, like the way that somebody sees the world and interacts with the world. You cannot, unless you want to be not human, you cannot escape your conditioning. You are conditioned by your history, by your biases, by the culture you grew up, by the traditions you practiced or have ignored, by the people that have been your educators. All of those things condition the way you see the world. So very important phrase here, very important. The most dangerous person is the person who doesn't know they have biases. That's the most dangerous person.
Well, it's also the thing they're going to use, the argument they're going to use to destroy the rule of law. Like, they are going to argue that because they're absolutely unbiased, essentially perfect, that their decision-making process is the framework, they themselves, actually, that they are the framework. Instead of the law being applied equally to all people, they're going to use this as the framework for deciding that they are the law. Like, they themselves are it because of their unique design, apparently. Other, like, unhuman design, inhuman design, whichever way you want to go ahead and label that. But they're I mean, this would have to be the beginning of transhumanism, right? They have obviously gone above us at some point without us knowing. Describe themselves.
It would at least be masquerading with the type of authority and excellence that they themselves believe they should wield as being transhuman or transcending the rest of us, leaving us behind, right? And you're right. If this Disinformation Governance Board is allowed to stand in any sort of way, then it does utterly dismantle the First Amendment. And the First Amendment is the only amendment, friends, that matters. The Second Amendment is equally as important to the extent that it protects the First. But if you don't have a First Amendment, then as Aaron just said, they can establish pre-crime and thought crime, and it becomes the whims of what they believe is right or wrong, which is definitionally what totalitarianism is. Do you want a dictator?
Yeah.
Do you want an oligarch or a king? Well, that's what it looks like, where the will of the king is law. And that's what we're seeing here. If they can establish this information board and run with it, we're in trouble, because the First Amendment doesn't matter. If the First Amendment doesn't matter, forget the rest of the Bill of Rights. They'll be irrelevant, totally irrelevant.
Yeah. Any laws in any jurisdiction becomes completely irrelevant at that point. It's literally just rule by whim. Whoever's in power at that point in time, it doesn't matter. There's zero. There's no foundation to depend on at that point. It's just, honestly, it's chaos and violence, is what that is. Totally. There's no way you can get around it.
Totally, and they're still trying to sell us a bill of goods that's just it's just grotesque. Because, as I just said, the most dangerous person is a person who doesn't know they have bias. The best you can do is be cognizant of your biases and try to offset them when you know that they're driving your decisions and judgments. That's the best type of human. But the ones that masquerade as though they're neutral, they are either ignorant, they need to take some philosophy courses, or they're dangerous.
Yep.
Or perhaps both.
Yeah. I would actually say both are dangerous if, like, whether you're ignorant or intentionally misleading, both are dangerous in that if they're given access to the levers of power, the decisions they're going to make are ones that are catastrophic. There's possibly no coming back from this if this is let go forward. I mean, the tyranny that would happen after this, combined with the corporate tools that they have, it would be unlike anything that we've seen on the planet before. Fortunately, previous tyrants were bound by horses and, lesser technology. I think probably Hitler and Stalin and some of those were getting closer to being ones that couldn't be defeated. But you look at the drone technology and any number of different things they have access to at the moment. You let this go forward, there's no turning back. I mean, I don't know how you would. I'm not sure how you would fight this.
I don't think you can fight it. I mean, if, as you would say, it would just be a matter of running and hiding at that point. I mean, you either stop this now or that's it. I mean, in the Supreme Court, maybe they're doing some good things, maybe not. Maybe you like what they've done. But obviously, after the 2020 election, most of us have lost our confidence in the Supreme Court. So looking to them to save you, they're part of that same corrupt system that they can be gotten to clearly. The whole notion of justice is blind and the Supreme Court is this, kind of grandiose things that our last bastion of help is, to my mind, largely gone. That's not to say that they can't do something good or bad. The Supreme Court can't help us at times. I'm not saying that. It's just the fact that it seems as though when it really matters, the past 2 years at least, it's been relatively disappointing.
Yeah, it has been very disappointing. I mean, there's obviously there's still a lot of hope out there, and we should fight in whatever ways possible. I know for most of us, even for me, like in the previous video, I was joking around a little bit about starting to use gender specific words when applicable, like ministress or actress, like those different kinds of things. And I know people might, most are probably going to say that's kind of silly, but a lot of people criticize you when you focus on all these bigger political things. They're like, why don't you just focus on things you actually have the power to change? And then, I'll mention stuff like this and people be like, that's not going to make a big difference. But you know what? Maybe it will. I mean, in my small sphere, I know I've ran into people who I've said actress, and if they were left leaning, I've actually had this happen a couple times where they'll try to correct me, and then it just opens up the conversation or shortens a conversation one way or another. But my point, my point with that is, yeah, it might be a small thing, but why not? Why not go ahead and just try to bring things to a sounder place? Go ahead and make those distinctions. It's not a matter of, it's not a diminutive or anything like that. It's a matter of simply observing accurately and calling things what they are, describing people as they are, that kind of thing. I think that's important.
And don't underplay that. Actually, it's one of the things the left has done very well. The left does wage the definition, the colloquial wordage that we use. They have waged that war very well. And basically, you're saying, I want to do the same thing they do. Because I think that attitude that you're suggesting could be out there, which is it doesn't make that big a difference. No, you're totally wrong. All cultural changes, or the vast majority of them, happen through incremental means. Very gradually and very small steps. And the way that you use your words is part of that cultural battle. So in every sort of way that we can use verbiage and words that upholds and affirms traditional values, the scientific differences between men and women, the fact that we believe that sexual deviance is bad. It's not just kind of a moral reality or whatever. And across the board, right? You're not just talking about this, transsexual stuff. You're talking about whatever sexual deviance, right? But any way that we can use our words in that traditional way to uphold that is to play the same game that the left play. And we shouldn't act like it matters, because it's actually fundamentally the main thing that matters. If you want to,
it doesn't matter.
We shouldn't say that it doesn't matter, because it certainly does.
No, it matters a lot. I remember, I think. And I had to have been in my teens when I first started hearing that like popularized, where people were like, no, don't say actress or actor, say actor only, just the uniform thing. And then, that started happening with pretty much everything across the board. And, I remember being kind of put off by that at that point, but I think because of the way they incrementalize a lot of this stuff, it's like, it's relatively innocuous, yada, yada. And then you find yourself essentially just to not have undue friction or whatever, just added friction in conversations, you start slowly changing, the way you refer to things, just so you kind of like avoid various issues. And 15, 20 years later, we're now to saying literally scientists and doctors on a daily basis on news networks claiming that gender isn't a thing. Like actual scientists now saying that gender isn't a thing. And it's just like, no, it is. And, if that was the little beginnings, like where it started when I was young, then you know what, I'll go back there. And start. I mean, it was obviously important.
Well, if you really...
And I didn't see the importance of it then.
If you really want to go back to the beginning of it, I can remember when I was in grade school in the 90s, and it was the change from using the word sex to gender. Because it used to be, it was male or female, and we called it sex. And then I remember probably when I was in middle school, them introducing this word gender, and then they would differentiate that from sex. And then eventually, so you used to have sex and gender, which was like the first, you're like, that's kind of weird. How would it be different? And then eventually the word sex disappeared, and then it was only gender. And now, of course, this shows you that the left has won this words war, because now there's no reference to sex whatsoever. Because sex is really clear. Like, you either have biological makeup, the reproductive organs of a woman, or you have the biological makeup and reproductive organs of a man. And of course, there's disformities or abnormalities related to that, but at the very basic level, you're either XY or XX genetically. So you're either one sex or the other. You're not some amphibly, some transformer that masquerades between the two. But anyway, so I think that for me, when I think back to that, and I remember I wasn't a thoughtful person back then, but I remember noticing that change.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's like it's my personal kind of beginning or awareness of some of those different things. Because, like I said, it could not have been later than I had to have been about 15, something like that. I mean, and for the most part, I cared about a lot of things that most kids at that point didn't, but I can't say that I thought much about a lot of these feminist arguments and different things at that particular point. So that was kind of my first interaction, or at least the first interaction I can recall, like remember sort of being just pronounced and like, it's one of the first ones I can go back to as being like the start or beginning for my interest or interaction with that particular fight. And so I guess my personal beginning.
Well, and that's my personal beginning. I'm sure, maybe there's something that predates that observation, but it was significant, and it's not unimportant. We need to wage the battle and our words and our verbiage and our traditions, where we spend our money. I mean, essentially the left makes it an unrestricted war, and that's what it is. It's an unrestricted ideological war. We're either going to uphold traditional values across the board in every way that we conduct our lives, or we're going to advance leftist ideology. So are you paying for Disney Plus today, friend? If so, why are you funding groomers? Right? Are you using these type of gender fluid categories? But you say you're a conservative. Well, why are you helping the left then by doing so? Right? Those are the type of questions we want to be asking ourselves. Even if it seems innocuous and small, we need to ask those questions.
And I think even for me, one of those things, it's like people will come back and be like, well, good grief, if you're going to pick at that, you're just going to be fighting with everything wherever you're at. And I think, I understand that response to some degree, but another part of me, I think the counter, or at least what's been developed in my own heart, is I'm not trying to fight against the culture now. I had a mind towards that before. I presently don't have a personal desire to fight against the culture. That's not my main impetus on this one. I personally want to experience truth as close to it as possible. And if the first benefit of me just changing my vocabulary is my own personal enjoyment of just hopefully being more accurate in my own life, that's good enough for me. And if it helps other people kind of recategorize and reorient themselves towards, more sound science, yes, science, and healthy psychology and nature's God, then great. But I'll settle for my own heart and my own head, being pushed closer to those things. If that's the only result. That's not what I want to happen.
Well, yeah, and I think it's a little bit unfair way to put it. As you said, you were quoting this person that said, "Well, you're going to be fighting with everything," but I think that doesn't have a very, I would say, a very affirmative attitude behind it, because I don't even like. It's not that you're fighting. I mean, affirming a certain set of behaviors, tradition, value set, etc., means that I disaffirm those that don't agree with it, but it doesn't mean that I'm actively having to fight and like be angry or mad. So I wonder if that person has a fundamentally negative or skewed view on it, because anytime you affirm any sort of particular behavior pattern, you're going to be disaffirming others. But it doesn't mean that you're putting your energy into the fight as much as you're putting, as you just said, putting your energy into living well, being accurate, etc.
And that reminds me of this whole transphobic and homophobic thing that they've been pushing against the church just because churches don't agree with that type of living. That lack of agreement doesn't mean Christians are out there trying to put like homosexuals and transsexuals to the stake. That's just not the case. For most of the people, they are applying guidelines to their lives, their family, and promoting it for sure, but not violently. It's not like there isn't any transphobia or homophobia at all. I mean, in some places there is in some cases. My life experience, for the most part, and I've been in church my whole life, that's just not the case. They're not afraid of homosexuals. They don't agree with the lifestyle.
Right.
And they don't.
I mean, and it's the LGBTQ plus, whether it's not all the individuals, obviously, that belong to any of those categories, but it's the representative head that's seen in the public discourse through media and so forth that advance the totalitarian authoritarian nature of these groups. So whether they want to be part of that or not, sucks for them if they don't want to, but they demand that you accept their behavior, and we don't want to accept your behavior. Yep. We have a very different vision for life, traditional values, family values, wholesome families based on traditional norms and values and mores, and that's worked really well for the bulk of the 5,000 years or however long humanity's been here. And we don't have to. I don't have to agree with you, but I can not hate you, and I can not view you with other disdain or what have. But see, they have to vilify us, so they have to make it sound like.
And that's the thing.
We're monsters.
Yeah. That right there, that the language control side of their operation, where it's you not condoning that lifestyle means you hate. Like, you're essentially all kinds of inhumane, whatever, bigoted. No, that's not bigoted. That's having an opinion that's different, and I can have an opinion that's different without hating that person.
Well, and it reflects
where I am actively against them is where they don't accept my right to have a different opinion about the way that they live.
Well, sure. I mean, that's,
I'm against you on that one.
That's them projecting, and you and I talk a lot about this. That the scriptural mandates the type of categories, emotional, psychological, emotional, the type of categories that the scriptures demand are very complex. Where you're supposed to pray for people to be saved, but that already implies that you believe that they need help. Right? Therefore, they must be doing something that God does not approve of, and therefore you as the one praying agrees with God. So, but at the same time, God doesn't want you hating him. He wants you like conducting yourself in such a way that they might see it and think that lifestyle is better. But again, like that's a very complex emotional and psychological way. You have to be a very mature, very thoughtful, very careful person. And I think what we hear from the left, where you don't want to affirm my behavior, therefore you must hate me, it's probably how they think about. Yeah, they're the ones that think about the world that way, and I think they project that on everyone else, and it's because they're probably a relatively unsophisticated person when it comes to the development of their soul. They don't have those categories. They just don't have them.
Yeah. No, as far as I'm concerned, if that's the way they frame the things, like, they're the bigots. Like, they're the ones that are completely unaccepting and violent when it comes to that case. You do not, at least over the last little bit, when's the last time, and I really don't care about defending necessarily specifically the right, but at the same time, when's the last time a right-leaning group has burned a city down?
Nah, who knows? I guess I can't. Is it the Oklahoma bomber? Wasn't he identified as being somebody on the right? I can't remember. And I could be totally wrong.
Possibly.
I'll look it up while you talk.
Yeah.
Let me look it up while you talk.
And maybe it's just a poor thing to go, like direction to go down anyway in this conversation. I'm not sure. It's just, and why I say I don't necessarily care about. I really want to focus on protecting or bolstering or supporting those who are genuine constitutionalists. And that's something amongst the right at the moment. It's becoming harder and harder to find. So I'm personally kind of deciding where I fit in that spectrum at the moment, because the difference between the right and the left when it comes down to the actual material of what they believe is becoming harder and harder to distinguish. So it's
well, it's not a bad question, but of course, I mean, you're just trying to draw out, and I think this is the underlying framework you're trying to draw out, the fact that as the left descends into immorality and upholds immorality as moral, or they put it under some virtue, right, that acts as a guise to cover up the immorality that they want to advance, as that continues moving forward, we're going to find higher and higher correlation between people with leftist ideology and people that want to burn, loot, and murder. Because you can't advance those type of regular behaviors and patterns and leave them unpunished and so forth without expecting it to infiltrate the rest of culture and start becoming more of a norm, right? So, and we're going to see that. And people on the right, generally speaking, not everyone, but most of us, whether you're a biblically minded or scripturally minded person or not, even if you're not, you at least have this kind of American ethos where you like the fundamental values, which were built around really Old Testament law. If you want to get into the nitty gritty of it, it's why you see Moses and the Ten Commandments and so forth at courthouse in various places. But I mean, most people want to say we believe that traditional way of living is good, whether you're a Christian or religious person or not. And that's going to lead you in the opposite direction of where the left wants to. Really, they want the immigrants to become kind of these lawless people because they're advancing them into our country in a lawless manner to begin with. I mean, really.
Yeah, it's one of those things we've conversated before because I've dug into this one for a while, and I've just described really disliking and almost believing that the conservative narrative is something that was planted in the right by the left in order to just kind of pacify them. Because in this particular life, in this life, on this side of eternity, you are not conserving anything unless you're taking ground. And for the most part, at least in my sphere, as I've grown up in church my whole life. Most of the people I've been around describe themselves as conservatives. And most of them held an attitude of pretty much, if you leave me alone, we're fine. That kind of thing. It's just like they're essentially just trying to conserve things. Doesn't work. It doesn't work unless you're taking ground, because somebody out there is fighting and taking ground. If you aren't, if you're just conserving, you're not conserving anything. Yeah. I don't believe that at all.
That's an interesting perspective. Kind of hits a little bit on that whole myth of the neutral ground category as well, right? Because there's, it's like, okay, they can be taking
There's no
ground, but
neutral.
somehow we're just conserving ground. But that's not possible. If the left is advancing ideologically and promoting their values, which are really vices in many cases, but if they're succeeding at that, then you're losing ground by trying to just hold ground, right? So yeah, you're right. And I mean, really, and maybe that's one of the ways that we failed and we can continue to do better is by providing a worldview and a lifestyle that is contrary to them. And I think the fact that a lot of people, conservatives in this country, people on the right, are disconnecting from the big tech companies, from big media, from being having the narratives tailored to them by social media platforms that are controlled by the left. I think we're on really interesting precipice that we might be taking that turn. What do you think?
A turn back towards actually fighting and taking ground for ourselves?
Where we can actually advance our own positive narratives that aren't reactions to the left, but that we're actually advancing our worldview through our lifestyles and the way that we behave, rather than, up to this point, basically until 2020, including myself, maybe a few years before it, but, you're basically letting the left frame everything, and you're just trying to, fend it off, right? But, I mean, the big sacrifices that are required to advance a positive worldview from the right is for us to give up on a lot of those platforms that frame our thinking on matters. And so the fact that people are turning away from big media, big tech social media platforms is very good. It could be the groundwork for that positive narrative.
It's possible. Yeah, I mean, I know in the last podcast we kind of talked about whether or not we believe Elon Musk is going to, keep his word and fight to make Twitter a truly open platform for free speech. And if that's the case, if that's what he does with it, then I agree. We have we're in an interesting place and time right now.
And we have to make it
push for something good.
Well, we have to make it sophisticated too, right? So that we don't set ourselves up by the left to claim, and they'll claim it anyways, right? But the harder time they have, the more we get in front of it, the better. Where you say, no, we believe Elon Musk and people on the right should censor certain behaviors that are what we would say are immoral. Like we believe, like you need to go ahead and get ahead of that. So that, because otherwise the left is going to cast that if we say that anything is off limits, that we are just as great in violation of free speech as they are. That's what they want to do. They want to make us morally equivalent. And the truth of it is, though, is if we go ahead and have that narrative going forward that certain immoral behavior should not be open for public discourse, then we're already gotten ahead of it. And that is part of how every society works anyways. There's always going to be certain behaviors that you have laws against. It's just the way it is.
Yeah.
And those behaviors are censored or punished.
And it might be something that quite a few disagree with. But Elon Musk should be looked at as an example for how we, maybe in lesser ways, use our capital. If people want to know how to fight, use what you have. Use what you have to buy things, create things, build things for a better future. And that's one of the things I love about him is, when he describes some of the stuff that he's done, he just says, I want to look at the future and not be sad. And, I hope the Christian out there, any number of people, it's like, let's use our capital to try and build a better future and do what he's doing. I mean, it might look at, say, okay, we can't do what a billionaire can. That's fine. You don't have to. Like, you've got people you interact with on a daily basis. If it's just something as small as starting to make the words you use more accurate to the truth.
Yeah, and we've got to give up on envy too. Because unfortunately, the left is in control. I mean, 95% of the corporations in the world are controlled by those three big finance companies: State Street, Vanguard, and BlackRock, and then Berkshire Hathaway. Yeah. So I mean, basically, you just have to be willing to accept, you're not going to have the 95% cutting edge type of experience you can have while relying on utterly woke, immoral corporations. Just not going to and that has to be okay. We have to remove the envy from our lives, and we have to say perhaps what not using those things will bring us a more enriched human experience. I, for one, know if I didn't have an iPhone today, I'd spend a lot less time looking at a screen than I do. And part of me wishes I didn't have one, frankly. It's probably spend more time with my kids, my relationships would be deeper, etc.
Yeah, possibly. That's definitely a double-edged one. I love if used properly, the kind of information and books that you can have at the tip of your fingers. That one, granted, there's a lot of bad stuff you can have at the tip of your fingers too, but it's one of those things where it's like what I know, what I can know because of some of those devices is something that's pretty exciting. Unfortunately, like the lion's share of people out there are watching TikTok videos and
and here's the thing. I don't disagree with you, but I'll say on the whole, when I look at the type of what the, let's say, 19th century produced in terms of people's writing and speaking abilities, if you read their works from back then compared to today, people have access to way more information and could have much better articulation of ideas. But lo and behold, they mostly suck compared to anyone that was educated and grew up in the 19th century, right? So even 18th century. My point is that it's interesting that we're seeing a tremendous diminution of the human person, although they have greater access to knowledge than they have ever had before. But they seem altogether unimpressive when you compare them with people that didn't have access to any of these things.
Yeah. Yep.
Including myself. So coming back to what's her name? Jankowicz? Psycho lady?
Yeah.
Psycho censor. That's her new name. The mistress of psycho censoring. Watch out, she's gonna get the gulag. Don't worry, they got the FEMA camps ready for you already. Remember, they got those out there. They call it the shielding approach. The CDC's got the. I'm sure they're gonna be like, oh, by the way, we're working in conjunction with the CDC. If you're somebody that loves this information, you're assuming that you have COVID. We'll need to put you in this concentration. I mean, green camp, not a concentration camp, a green shielding camp. Very nice. You'll have a great time there. It's like a luxury resort. But yeah, coming back to her, I just recognize, friends, that without free speech, and when you give the government potentially the possibility to start creating profiles based on your thought patterns that they're distilling out from probably data that they collect on the internet, you've got endless power. As Aaron said earlier, there's no stopping that. There's no coming back from that. Unless you end up with some sort of massive, just hugely bloody war where just like you don't even want to discuss the amount of blood that would have to be shed to correct it, right?
Yeah, it would truly be apocalyptic. It would be because you're not going to be able. It would be unlike anything.
Go ahead.
You won't be able to fight it. Yeah, Second Amendment, and in large part, with the kind of stuff that they have at their disposal, with no law guiding them. If it's, we're absolutely unbiased, we're the image of perfection, our whim, our decision-making is now the framework, the foundation by which, punishment or blessing is disseminated. Yeah, it's beyond ugly what would happen from that with the tools that they have.
Yeah, well, as you say, it would be apocalyptic if you were going to try to correct it, because as you just said, the whole notion of like Second Amendment or whatever with the type of advanced technology. You got rods of God, right?
Yeah.
They can drop a little penny-sized piece of metal from space right now and create a little localized nuclear explosion. It's just kind of like silly even to think. But I'm just saying, like, it would take that measure of death if you were going to be like, we're going to stop them. It would just have to be like everyone on the planet has to agree with you, and you have to like all be willing to die. That's kind of where it would happen.
It's funny. I just watched a G.I. Joe movie yesterday that had the lines in it are horrible, but the power, everyone will bow at the power of Zeus. But they had this weapon called Zeus. It was a satellite-based weapon that used tungsten rods to do that same exact thing. So I guess they kind of you took that rod of God concept and actually used it in the movie. But anyway.
I guess so.
How was the acting bad in that? But it's still fun. I can't help myself. These stupid action movies speak, and here I am like busting on TikTok and in the background. I'm like, I can't, I'm hooked on stupid action movies. So, hey, there's room for improvement. Room for improvement everywhere. Absolutely everywhere.
For sure.
But
myself included, yeah, because I think, how many times have I canceled Netflix and then restarted it because my kid wanted a show or some show I wanted? I think the last time I did was the new Witcher came out. I just got to watch it and I'll cancel it again, so.
Yeah.
There it is.
Yeah, apps actually having some conviction behind the decisions at some point. Actual virtue instead of apparently, what that is just, if you make those decisions and it's that kind of that flimsy or back and forth, it's just virtue signaling at that point. So
yeah, it certainly needs more development.
Same thing.
So as you said, well, there's conviction there. That's a good way to put it.
Yeah. But coming up on an hour, so we'll go ahead and wrap this up. This has been an absolutely fun podcast to make today. I've enjoyed myself, and hopefully you all have too. Scalise, thank you for joining me again today, and thank you guys. Cheers.
Always a pleasure. Cheers.